So today, I'm going to be your cannabis industry expert. And what does that mean? What is that word cannabis? There's a big misconception. There's a lot of stigmas to the word cannabis. For some, it's the devil's weed. For others, it's a pseudo-medical excuse to get high. And for others, it's a true medicinal benefit. Well, as a cannabis industry expert, the first thing I always get asked is, are you going to be smoking a joint out back later? That's just the reality of people in the cannabis industry, and that's the reality of a lot of people that they have the stigmas and misconceptions of the people who are actually in this industry. So I'm here to tell you guys, actually, even though I'm the cannabis industry expert, I actually don't use cannabis, and the reason why I don't is because I don't have any medical issues. But if I did have some medical issues, you bet I would be using cannabis. So show of hands here, how many people know that there are actually people who use cannabis on a daily basis and have never been high before? So a few. So how is that possible? Well, over here is THC. THC stands for tetrahydrocannabinol. This is the compound in cannabis that gives the psychedelic, the stoner, the feeling that you get when you get high. Over here on the right-hand side is CBD. And what's important to understand about CBD is CBD does not get you high. It does not have THC, and it does not have the psychoactive compound that THC does. Now, CBD is really important because CBD has been shown to help with stress, through anxiety, PTSD, and most importantly, seizures. It was great today during lunch. I was sitting at the table, and I was enjoying the people at my table, and a few people actually had comments about how they're actually using CBD through their arthritis. And it's amazing to see how much we've come in just a year about CBD itself. Now, show of hands, how many people here know that California legalized cannabis, and we are now the largest state in the union in the United States that has legalized? Show of hands. So everyone knows. So it's not new news by any means of imaginations. Well, for a lot of Californians, it raised a lot of questions when this happened. Is there going to be more traffic accidents? Or what about the children? And for some, it means that I could finally relive my Woodstock days, And I understand, a lot of people have emotional ties to the plant, whether it's something that you feel is socially bad, or if you had a positive experience with a plant. This is something that a lot of people have emotional ties directly to it. So it's important to understand how we went from there to where we are now. So back in 2014, there were 16 states that had legalized cannabis, whether it was adult use, medicinal, or CBD. In 2015, that number raised to 34. By 2016, it was 38, and by 2017, it was 43, and today, we have 46 states that have some type of cannabis laws in place. So let's look at that again. It's incredible to see that in just 4 years, that the entire United States pretty much now has something related to cannabis. So how did that happen? Well, there's two major factors that have happened that allowed for the cannabis industry as a whole to explode. One, the stigma and the misconceptions of cannabis have been changing rapidly. And number two, there were federal protections that were placed by the federal government that actually protected the industry to allow it to grow.
Every laugh, every word is a gift Charlotte Figgy's family didn't think they'd ever see. 2 years ago,
we had reached the end of the line for medical options.
They were ready to say goodbye. The epileptic seizures started when Charlotte was just a baby and grew more violent, more frequent.
It's okay, honey. Mommy's here.
Up to $1,200 a month. Charlotte couldn't walk, talk, or eat.
Her quality of life was none. I mean, we were at the point where we were just praying that she would die peacefully in her sleep because it was so much suffering. She wasn't there. Charlotte wasn't there anymore.
The family was desperate. Charlotte's dad had heard about the healing qualities of cannabidiol, or CBD, a chemical in the marijuana plant that doesn't cause a high. It so happened a group of brothers in southern Colorado was already experimenting with it.
I didn't really think it was going to work.
A few drops of oil made from CBD, taken orally twice a day, proved her wrong.
This is where I store her medicine, in this lockbox. And this is how one dose.
It's now called Charlotte's Web, named after the little girl who was the first patient. There have been many more success stories and about 250 families who've moved to Colorado to treat kids with epilepsy and cancer.
Our national and international wait list climbs by 100, 200 every day, and it's currently around between 7,000 and 8,000.
So did everyone hear that? She's using cannabis every single day as a child, and she's not getting high. And the reason why that's important is because for the first time in 2014, people were starting to see that the cannabis plant was actually being used to help children with epileptic seizures. Imagine if you were a parent, what you would do as a parent to help your child if they were having seizures just like Charlotte Figge. This beautiful girl up here, her name is Alexis. She lived in Texas, and she had to move from Texas to Colorado so she could get CBD types of medicine. And what's important in that is because people started seeing that it was helping children, people started really realizing that maybe this isn't a drug that we are always told is bad, but maybe there are some types of medicinal benefits that can come from it, specifically in CBD. And I'm not here today to victimize and say that THC is the villain by any means of the imagination. THC, I have a really close connection to it. This time, a couple years ago, my girlfriend at the time, she actually got diagnosed with stage 2 cancer. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that cannabis can cure cancer by any means of the imagination, but what I will tell you is that the worst part about cancer is the chemotherapy. And during the chemotherapy, if you know anyone who's gone through cancer, it's one of the most brutal side effects you could ever imagine. Well, with the help of her using THC, she could actually eat. She could actually sleep. And you could imagine how important that is for a chemo victim to be able to have some type of semblance of life. And so THC has been proven and shown through Israel and Canada, through those researches, that they help specifically with insomnia, appetite suppression, and most importantly, pain. And this is what you've been hearing a lot. I'm sure a lot of people have been hearing that cannabis is the solution to the opioid crisis. The difference is opioids, when you take a Vicodin or an Oxycontin, what it essentially does is it removes your ability for your nerves to bind the receptors. And because of that, it doesn't transfer the pain signals to your brain. There's a lot of bad side effects specifically to opioids, and that's why we're in a crisis today. What cannabis does through the THC is the same type of thing that we're talking about with the psychedelic and the high effect. It allows you to disassociate yourself from the pain. But there are no side effects from that. And that's why they're saying that this is the solution to the opioid crisis. Now, a couple years ago, I met my CEO, Damian McKinney, who's present here today. And at that time, they were looking at getting into the cannabis industry. And I've said it before, there's a big stigma about the type of people who are in the industry. And even though I was a cultivator and I was a grower, I also had a real estate background and I had a finance background, and I didn't even own a tie-dye shirt. So for them, they were like, wow, there's a level of professionalism actually in this industry. And you could imagine if you were a large company, a capital company that has a reputation, the type of questions that you would talk about behind closed doors. Like, what will our employees think? Are we condoning this type of behavior? What will our peers think about us getting into the industry? But what was important is over that month-long period, they were willing to learn, listen, and understand why cannabis is here where it is today. And it's stories like Charlotte Figge's and Alexis that really allowed people to understand that cannabis is not what it was been told to be out for the longest time. There's actually a lot of good with this plant itself. And Damien is not the only one. 64% of Americans believe that cannabis should be legalized. And most importantly, 85% of the United States, from the Gallup poll, says that medicinal cannabis should be legalized. Now, because of the change in the conceptions and the stigmas of cannabis, the federal government had to make some protections for those patients. There's two main protections that the federal government gave in 2013, 2014. One was the Cole Memo. The Cole Memo said that if you were in a state and you were operating a business in a regulatory state that had a strict regulatory framework, the US government would not involve in your business. So Colorado was the #1 candidate for the Cole Memo at that time. In 2014, they took it even another step further. The Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment allocated $0 to the DEA for anything related to medicinal cannabis. So virtually taking away the DEA's ability to pursue anything related to medicinal cannabis. In 2018, there was a monumental moment in the cannabis industry. And in January 4th, Jeff Sessions, after the changeover of Donald Trump, he rescinded the Cole Memo. And a lot of people were actually really fearful of the fact that they took away the Cole Memo. I'm here to tell you that I actually viewed it as a positive. when they removed that protections. And the reason why I viewed it as a positive is because over the next month when that happened, it was the first time I've seen this country in a long time ever have any bipartisan support for anything. You had senators from all the states, from Nevada, Oregon, Colorado, all the ones you would expect to come out and say, like, you know, we want cannabis in our state. And then you had even Republicans who came out and saying that, you know, we may not agree with cannabis, but we believe in states' rights. And that was an important piece. And by April of this year, Donald Trump told the top senator of Colorado that he would acknowledge states' rights and he would not do anything related to the federal government. By June 7th, Senator Warren introduced the first bill called the States' Rights Act Bill, and what that essentially did was it allowed cannabis states to control their own government and would not allow the federal government to get involved. Most importantly, it would allow for federal banking, or excuse me, not federal banking, but state charter banking inside their own states. And the next day, Donald Trump came out and said that he most likely would support it. So it's important to understand that this bill has been brought out, and it's been a few months now. It has not hit the floor, but it's an important piece that we're moving in the right direction. And the reason why all these things were coming out is because Jeff Sessions tried to pull the Cole memo. So why would a state care about the cannabis industry? Well, by 2020, the cannabis industry will be larger than the organic food market, the craft beer market, and wine market combined. It's going to be larger than the NFL in 2020. And as you see here, in 2018, we're almost doubling, and we're seeing exponential growth. And the reason why is because California legalized January 1st. California is expected to be a $6 billion market. And if you look up there, what it means is that California itself will represent 50% of the entire sales of the United States of America. That's a drastic figure of how large California's market is. Forbes said that by 2020, there'll be more cannabis jobs created than in the manufacturing industry. And that's staggering figures. In the last 4 years, cannabis has been growing at a staggering rate of 31% per year. And to put that in perspective, that is faster than the dot-com boom. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the dot-com boom. The dot-com boom was growing at a 24% annual growth rate. And that's a staggering figuring that cannabis is at very early stages and it's already outpacing the dot-com boom. So what have we seen in the last year? So since I've had my last talk in December, we've seen a lot of different things change. The most important change that's happened in the last year is that cannabis companies have now access to the capital markets. And the reason why that's so important is because when I was going out and I was raising capital for our first cannabis real estate deal, we were doing $50,000 to $100,000 checks at a time because there weren't a lot of people who were sophisticated or ever invested into the cannabis industry. Had a lot of people invested in real estate, not a lot of people invested in cannabis, so the checks were a lot smaller. So even these larger national groups, they were having the same issues and problems. Their average check size was $300,000 to $400,000, and it was limiting their growth. With Canada legalizing, they were able to access the Toronto Stock Exchange, and now we have multiple companies from the United States go IPO. And not only have they gone IPO, they have billion-dollar valuations. And with those valuations of $1 billion, they're receiving that capital to grow throughout the United States. That's why this year is an important time, because this is when you're going to really start seeing exponential growth throughout the United States. And there are a lot of brands who are recognizing what's going on. Coca-Cola has come out and said that they are looking at possibly doing a CBD beverage with Aurora Cannabis Group out of Canada. Heineken is creating an entity that they're going to be creating their first brand new beer with THC and CBD infused cannabis. Imperial Tobacco, which has Cool and also Winston, they're looking currently right now into getting into the market. Constellation Brands, which owns Corona, Modelo, made a $4 billion investment into canopy growth in Canada. They took a 38% position into that company because that's how much they believe that this company is going to grow. That says a lot. And most importantly, GW Pharmaceuticals. GW Pharmaceuticals is probably the first legitimate pharmaceutical cannabis company, and they were able to go to the FDA and get the first cannabis CBD pill approved by the FDA. And the reason why that's important is because cannabis was a Schedule I drug. Schedule I drugs mean that there's no medicinal benefits, and actually what happened today is the DEA descheduled CBD from a Schedule I drug to a Schedule II drug. Those are monumental things in this industry because that means that we're going towards a path of legalization. In California, we expect to get over $1 billion in taxable revenue. That revenue is going to be used specifically to help schools, for research, and most importantly, the law enforcement. So California is receiving a lot of these funds from the cannabis industry that they would never receive before. And what we've seen in every single legalized market, from Colorado, Washington, to now California, is there's a profound impact in real estate, specifically in the industrial real estate markets. And the reason why is because cannabis companies are willing to pay whatever it takes to get into a piece of real estate so they can be in the fastest growing industry in the United States. If you don't believe me, read the headlines. Real estate boom powered by pot, the New York Times. Industrial real estate market gets a boost from marijuana legalization, Forbes. Marijuana legalization is really a real estate story, and that has big implications for California, Entrepreneur Magazine, and landlords are the winners in pot's booming business. So what we've seen so far is that in Colorado, from 2009 to 2014, 1 out of every 3 new tenant that was going into the Denver industrial market was a cannabis operator. And not only were they a cannabis operator, they were paying 2 to 3 times higher market rents to get into those spaces. It decreased their vacancy from 7.3 to 3.7 during one of the worst real estate crises of this country's ever seen. The Denver market saw a 44% increase from 2014 to 2016, and the Portland market for the industrial prices saw a 40% increase. We purchased a building in Oakland, December of 2017. We purchased that building for $154 a square foot in Oakland. Today, there's not a single building that is listed less than $200 a square foot. It has a profound impact because of the amount of space and the needs of cannabis tenants. And these cannabis tenants are not only paying higher rents, they're also taking up the supply that other types of businesses wouldn't be willing to take. And this is what's driving the overall factor of cannabis and industrial prices as a whole. So a lot of people ask me, where is the industry? If you were to put this as a baseball game, there's 9 innings. What inning would we be in? Going the 7th, even the 1st. What I'm here to tell you is that we are getting into the car and driving to the game. That's how early this industry really is. And it's important to understand that because no matter if you're a believer in cannabis or you don't like cannabis, it's important to understand that this is going to be around us for the rest of our life. And I'm not here to stand up and change your misconceptions or your stigmas about cannabis. The only reason why I'm here today is to ask that you listen, learn, and understand why it is here today. Thank you very much. Thank you.